Part of the plain language writing process is deciding what you need to say, understanding what your audience needs from the communication, what they want to hear. And then obviously there are things that you must say, but getting that right. So what do I want to say? What is important here? And getting your communication down to only that thing. We truly believe, I think Elizabeth shares my belief, that people have a right to understand the documents they need to actively participate in their own lives.
Welcome to Legal Off The Leash, the podcast where we take the legal profession out of the box and into a happier, more fulfilling future.
We're your hosts, Elizabeth de Stadler and Scott Simmons, and today we'll be talking about the following. Whereas it has been the time-honoured yet lamentable custom of members of the legal profession, whether by force or precedent, by fear of imposition, or by the altogether too human inclination towards obfuscation as a mark of erudition, to employ in their written language legalese. I can carry on. There are 217 further words. So for those of you who haven't guessed, today we are talking about legalese and the alternative plain language, why lawyers should try to use plain language and how they can get there. We're talking to Colleen Trolove. She is a proud New Zealander. We have a little bit of trouble because Liezl is a proud South African, but I have a firm undertaking that we won't talk about rugby or the haka. She has been a trainer, coach, writer, and editor in plain language for the last 16 years, and she co-owns the fabulously named online School of Unprofessional Writing, and I can really recommend it. I have actually enrolled in a couple of modules myself. It's funny. She's one of the lucky ones who actually uses her English degree at work. Colleen's role allows her a bird's eye view of New Zealanders' professional writing. And the more she reads, the more she believes that simple, clear communication is the best way to go. Colleen is on the board of the Technical Communicators Association of New Zealand. She has judged the USA Clearmark Awards, the USA Federal Report Card, the New Zealand Science Communicator Awards, and she has helped jazz up at the Right Mark New Zealand Plain Language Awards by singing at 4 of the awards ceremonies. Colleen also does CrossFit, which I believe is the devil's work. Then we have Liezl van Zyl. She is a non-information designer from South Africa. Liezl founded Hey Plain Jane, an information design agency. Her superpower is to make your communication clear by applying her proprietary mix of design thinking, behavioral economics, cognitive psychology, UX design techniques, and hostage negotiation. From that, you can also see that she also uses humor, except that this hostage negotiation thing is actually legit. She does it. Liezl makes a mean lemon meringue, which Colleen will then go and exercise off in the CrossFit, I almost said lab.
I will turn it into muscle.
Yes, I'm somewhat belated. Colleen, Liezl, welcome to Legal Off The Leash.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I was hoping you would call it Liezl off the leash for the day, but I mean...
Oh, that's good.
Liezl Off The Leash.
It's got a good ring to it.
That does have a good ring to it.
It is sometimes called Liz Off The Leash.
So I've got important questions to get us started. Colleen, the singing, Liezl, hostage negotiation. Okay, let's go with those to get us started.
I want to hear about the singing too.
Okay.
I want to hear the actual singing.
I like singing. Yeah, I love singing. And I haven't done it for years because my kids hate me singing. They hate me singing. And there was one stage where I decided to get it going again. I used to do jazz singing in my 20s. I would go around and, perform in cafes and restaurants and things like that.
Wow.
And then I had children, and then it turns out they don't like me singing. And so I had a resurgence a couple of years ago. I decided one of the problems of being a singer is the band. You have to get a band who turns up. And so this was a problem. They often just wouldn't. And so I can play the guitar, but I hadn't learned jazz guitar. So I learned jazz guitar a few years ago and to my songs so that I could be the whole band. But to practice, I would have to do it at 5:30 in the morning before the kids woke up in the laundry so they couldn't hear me down the other end of the house. It was basically just too much effort and work. And so I've put that aside. I hope to pick it up again in later life. But that's that random story for you.
My favourite is singing in the shower. Love singing in the shower. The rest of the family don't love it so much. But everything from Sam Cooke to Whitney Houston, George Michael, all of it. Shower, I am Frank Sinatra, I am away. once. And then
Excellent.
if I'm like clearing up after dinner in the kitchen, yeah, love it.
I
Mhm.
would pay money to hear you sing my favorite Dolly Parton song, I Will Always Love You.
That is a regular.
I
And
use that
assuming-
on workshops to teach people the passive voice.
Feel a duet coming on.
Or a quartet, because it seems all of us like singing. Because Liezl, you like singing as well, don't
Uh-huh.
you?
That was less convincing. So Liezl, hostage negotiation. Tell us about that.
Yes, so Elizabeth and I have been together for a long time, and so I just felt it was time for me to learn about hostage negotiation.
I just want to point out, when she says together, she means professionally.
But she is cute.
Okay, no. So during COVID, Elizabeth and I and our colleagues, because we work together often, we all decided to keep busy and to keep from going insane. We would take random courses, and so the random course that I picked was hostage negotiation, and I thought it was funny in the beginning, but as I went through it, I thought, there are so many practical applications to the work that we do in plain language, especially the connection with empathy and how to use empathy in not only difficult situations, but in everyday situations. So with your family members and with your colleagues, how to get them to do what you know to be the best thing for them to do.
That sounded
Um,
like what you really wanted to say is how to get them to do exactly what you want. Because, okay,
to make them think that it was their idea. So that's proven, very useful over the years.
with Elizabeth.
Indeed.
She's
He'll
got my
often
number.
say, guys, I have a great idea. And I'm like, I know.
Okay, I don't like the direction this is taking, so I'm going to take it back. Okay, so I'm interested to hear, and Colleen, will start with you, your backstories. I mean, like, why did you become interested in teaching people how to write and then teaching people how to write in plain language?
I kind of fell into it. I had a sort of one of those careers at the beginning where you do a bit of this, a bit of that, and didn't really adore any of it until I had this sort of epiphany moment one day that I should totally become an English teacher, English as a second language for adults. And so I retrained to do that and absolutely loved it. But then I did that for, I think it was about 6 years. And then once you've worked your way through all of the levels, it starts to feel very repetitive. And so I was walking down Lambton Quay, which is like the main street in Wellington, to go sign up back to an admin job, thinking anything would be better than the same thing over and over again. And came across a sign that said, we'll teach you how to write or we'll do it for you. And I thought, I could do both of those. So I went up the stairs and talked to the receptionist. And 6 months later, I had a job at Write Limited, which is New Zealand's biggest plain language agency. And I think it's one of the biggest ones in the world. I learnt there. And they were phenomenal teachers. And I worked there for 14 years and just got absolutely fascinated by it. Every document is different. The context changes, the audience changes, how everyone is a puzzle to be solved. I think that's why I love it.
What's your favorite type of document to work with?
Hey, whose podcast is this?
Hey, I came because I am a huge fan. You get to ask my question.
For me, because I'm more of a trainer, like I do editing, but for me, the people I like to work with the most are policy advisors. Love central government policy advisors.
Why?
Because they get to do some phenomenal thinking in their jobs. Like the good ones, the great ones are so wise and so widely educated. And they are just phenomenal thinkers, great researchers. And it's just such a thrill to be able to help them channel that into great advice.
Liesl's backstory.
Do you really want me to tell my backstory?
Yes.
I thought it would be a really great idea to become a psychologist and to help people. And then I came to Stellenbosch University for some psychometric testing. And the person came out afterwards to give me my results and said, basically, please don't work with people or animals or plants. Like anything that's alive, you shouldn't be working with anything that's living. And I was like, what do they know? Went ahead, studied psychology, and then in my final year, but I had some other like language subjects and so on. And in my final year, each professor had an opportunity to come and share the course that they're offering, the postgrad courses that they're offering. And one professor walked into the room and he just kind of put his enormous hand in the air and said, "The world needs you." And I was like, yes, sign me up. No idea what the course is, but I feel like I want to be needed by the world. And turned out it was document design. And so I studied document design, which was interesting because it's completely, I mean, it's a design thing, design direction. And I loved it so much. I loved that I could apply the cognitive psychology to the document design, because you have to understand your audience and you have to understand what people's challenges are and how you can kind of help them solve those problems by putting words on paper in a better way. And so document design kind of became information design and plain language writing. The plain language part actually came when Elizabeth was doing a project with the center that I worked for. And that's how she and I met. And that's like a decade ago.
I'm not a Harry Potter fan, so I don't get why it's written like this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And then someone can explain to me what the hell I just said, okay? You both work with muggles writing too. Do you think the legal writing is especially horrible?
So when you say muggles, I'm assuming you mean like an outsider group?
Non-lawyers.
Non-lawyers. Okay, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, so I'm a muggle then. And so is the question, how do I as a muggle work with lawyers to help them write clearly?
No, it is, are lawyers writing worse than the other professions?
Other professions.
Okay.
I think so. Yes. And I think the reason is because lawyers trade us in words, whereas, say, engineers trade us in measurements or maths. And so often lawyers are people who just love words, or they're the type who want to find out the Latin root of something, or they don't mind a choice phrase. They're that kind of person. And because of the environment they're in, they end up reading a heck of a lot of tricky stuff and becoming kind of ninjas at being able to understand it themselves. And so it is, I think, a badge of honor for a lot of lawyers that they can understand and use really unusual and difficult vocab and grammar. And in other professions, I think often writing is just the annoying part of the job that you have to do. If, say, you're an accountant or an engineer or something like that, for lawyers, it's the words are the thing. It's their thing that they have as their craft.
Such a part of their identity, right? So their value as an employee at a firm or as a professional is in using words to manage risk. And they believe that they use certain words are going to offer them greater protection than the common English equivalent. And so there's a fear that moving away from these commonly used legal phrases or legal words is going to open the company up to more risk, devaluing me. And, you know, why would they need me if everybody could understand?
It's really interesting that you talk like that, because I wonder whether part of the reason why I left the legal profession, aside from the horrific burnout that I didn't want to go through again, was that I never saw the words bit as the real value in what I was doing for clients. I used to hate drafting. I used to hate getting bogged down in whether we were talking about reasonable endeavors or best endeavors, or the arguing, the back and forth that you would have over a comma or one or two words that would end up with everyone getting really, really frustrated with each other and thinking, we just want to get going on this deal. Why are we arguing over those things? I never saw my role as being somebody whose job it was to come up with words. And I sometimes do look back and wonder whether that led to some of the insecurity I had about it, because other people were so bogged down in it. And I wanted to just work with clients. I just wanted to help clients. I just wanted to help get these relationships going. But I can completely understand where you're coming from and why you're saying that.
I was going to say, Colleen, what I got from you a couple of minutes ago is essentially lawyers fell in love with the wrong words. But my next question is, why does it matter? I'm a more sort of traditional lawyer. I only drank the Kool-Aid a bit later. I loved the words. I loved the technical sort of squabbling over meaning. I think it's because my parents are lexicographers. That was fun for me. And I also had fun displaying all these words. But why does it matter? Why is it bad that I did that? What are the negative consequences?
Main negative consequences that you don't, what's the word? Communicate. You think you're communicating, but you're not actually, because the other person doesn't understand.
I think it matters who you're communicating with, right? So if you're using those big words to flex to other lawyers who also know the big words, it doesn't matter. If you're speaking to people at the level that they understand, sure, do it. That doesn't make your document not in plain language. That's the worst formulation. Please don't use that in this podcast. So plain language is when you're communicating with people in a way that they can understand. If, however, you're communicating with people who don't have the experience that you have and don't have that vocabulary, and you're using those words deliberately to frustrate them or to confuse them, that's horrible. I'm not saying that that's what all lawyers do. I think it's just a case of being used to the precedents and grabbing something from the file and just reusing that without thinking about whether this person who has to sign this lease agreement or this employment contract or this application, fill in this application form, without thinking about their context and whether they have the same understanding of these words that you do.
I just want to add a little bit more on top. So, Liezl, you were talking about the words being easy enough for other lawyers to understand. And while the words might be, long, heavy sentences aren't easy for anyone, no matter how well educated you are. And badly structured information where you've got key messages hidden under a rock at the end of page 4 aren't easy for anyone, including other lawyers. So I think you're absolutely right about the vocab, where certain words other lawyers will understand really easily. But oh my gosh, wouldn't they love it if they knew, if you gave it to them on a platter, what the actual messages were in short, clear sentences, even if you do have the specialized terms still in there.
For sure.
So this is, for me, where we kind of start to get to the heart of it, which is it often feels like what's going on is that lawyers are drafting contracts for other lawyers, for litigators to be able to litigate it out in court. It feels like we reached a point when I was in practice where you hinted at it, Colleen, where even to the point where they're doing it to each other, they're creating these long, big paragraphs of clauses and subclauses to screw each other over. They're hiding something in there that they are hoping that the other lawyer's going to miss. My question is always over and over again, contract's not meant to be for other lawyers to understand. It's supposed to help start and develop and build a relationship between the two parties. And yet the two people or more, whoever it is, the two parties involved in the actual relationship don't understand what the contract says. And so they don't know what to do when something small goes wrong. So then something small becomes something bigger and bigger and bigger until it becomes catastrophic. And yet if the contract was drafted for them to understand, you wouldn't have half the problems that you end up having. Am I right? Am I wrong?
You're wrong.
I think you're absolutely right. One of the challenges that we encounter often when we try and help a company or a person write in plain language is that in their mind, they're writing for the worst outcome. They're writing for litigation, for the end of a relationship, for the divorce, essentially. So we have to be able to argue this in court, and there are established words and meanings and interpretations. But by the time your contract gets there, you've failed. Your relationship is over. Your communication has failed, and you've let down your client. So let's get them on the same page from the beginning. Clear obligations. What are we going to do if this or that happens? If they can understand it from the beginning, we're less likely to end up in court, end up at the end of the relationship, broken relationship.
I want to talk about empathy because I honestly think that is the most important part of communication, right? It's understanding the recipient, that principle of clicking that you are not your audience. So how do you go about understanding an audience or a person when it comes to how you are going to write? So what are the tools or questions that you use to unravel that, Colleen?
I do make a lot of assumptions out of the gate. I assume that my readers are busy, that mostly they want information handed to them on a platter, that they don't want more information than they absolutely have to consume. If the situation means that the audience is very specific, then often that means you can actually talk to them, find out a bit more, or it allows you to think, okay, they're likely to have this literacy level, they're likely to be comfortable with this kind of level of information. Those are my general starting points. And obviously, if you've got a target audience member nearby, grabbing them and showing them a chunk of something certainly doesn't hurt.
So I think what Colleen is also describing is user testing, and the plain language ISO standard, just the general one, not even the legal one yet, says we've got a test, and there's formative testing. So the kind of information that you gather about an audience before you start the baseline for the communication going forward. And there's a lot of ways that you can do that. Often when we work with a company that has a marketing department, that's a great place to start because they know their target group so well. That's in consumer facing communication. But just understanding basic things, like Colleen said, we can make a bunch of assumptions because of the human condition. We're all stretched. Our attention is stretched. We want the information on a platter. We know, well, in South Africa, it's a kind of a given that hardly anybody has English as their first language. So do they have English as a first language? Are they neurodivergent? Probably. Any member of your audience. Is any member of your audience outside of your organization? So unlikely to understand the sort of internal jargon that you tend to use with one another. But understanding, if you want to have a deeper understanding, it's always best to have a conversation with the target audience or a representative number of participants from the target audience, which is fun. User testing is always fun. There's always one crazy person in the group.
If you're having this conversation, two questions, like give me two questions that will get you over the line, not over the line, but will get you closer to understanding the person and how they would relate to the document that you're writing. Two questions. Put you on the spot. Liezl, you can go first.
Yeah, so that's a hard question because asking the participant is not always the best way of gathering information. It depends on what the communicative goal is of the document. What are you trying to achieve? If it's a form that you have to complete, because often forms are part of the, like an application process and terms and conditions, so it becomes part of the contract in the end. I don't want to ask them whether they can fill in the form or whether they understand, because nobody wants to look or feel stupid. So they're going to say, yes, I understand, or no, I don't have any problems, or whatever. You want to gather a number of completed forms and then look at where the problems were. You want to do comprehension testing with a couple of people and see where the common problems are. But I want to understand why that person came to that document. This is hostage negotiation, right? What brought you to the bank this morning? What brought you to this contract? What are you trying to achieve? Well, I'm trying to set up a company. I'm trying to buy a house. Okay, cool. What's the most important thing? I just want the transaction to go through. What are your biggest challenges? I don't understand which documents I need to submit when. I don't understand what's going to happen after I sign this contract. I don't understand why that person has to do this before I can do that. I don't understand these things. And you don't get all of that information from asking one person. You've got to ask a couple of people and then you start forming an image. So sorry, there's no one question that I want to ask them.
Well, I mean, I'm listening closely and I think we can sort of go, okay, well, what are the challenges that you experience with this document? Or what are the problems that you want to solve through this communication? Or, what do you find that's good about the document? You can also ask positive questions, right?
Yeah. Something that's useful to do is get them to do something. Like, so let's say you've done a website, give them a scenario. The reason you're coming to this website is to import something from Canada. And then they just try and find that spot. And you can very quickly see, can they do it? Can they use it? It's a very quick way to see whether the things you thought were the cues that were going to tell people this or that, whether they're working or not.
Something that you said a short while ago, Liezl, reminded me of a story from a few years ago. I was working with a lawyer, and what had happened was a client came to her to ask her if she could review and provide mini reports on a report that the client had received from their usual law firm, because the client didn't understand what was in the report, but didn't want to admit that they couldn't understand it. So instead of going back to their lawyer and saying, yeah, really sorry, all of that legalese you've used and all of these long, complicated sentences and paragraphs, I don't get them. I'm the client. I'm paying you. Make me understand it. Didn't do that. Went to another lawyer to say, please, could you help me understand what this is? There's still a lot of that goes on. And you're absolutely right, because clients I think they are still made to feel a bit small and stupid by law firms who don't get that their job is not to use the legalese. Everyone knows that lawyers are really smart and that they work with language, but that's not why a client pays a lawyer. A client pays a lawyer for them to untangle all of that and put it into language that they understand.
It's not just legal documents. I remember back in the day of the VCR, you get
The
an
what?
instruction booklet on how to install this thing, like how to make it work, or a video camera. You get an instruction booklet and then the thing doesn't work. And immediately you think, it's me. Instead of going, do you know what? They didn't explain this well. They missed a step. The lawyer didn't write this report very well. I'm going to ask them to redo it because I don't understand. We think it's me. I am too simple to understand this, very important, very learned language. And that doesn't, that's horrible. It doesn't just happen with people who have low levels of literacy. It happens with well-educated people who have expanded vocabulary. It happens to everybody. And there was a very interesting study. I can't think of the name of the researcher now, but they found something like 48% of people who receive legal documents, who work with legal documents daily, have to ask someone else for an explanation. That's a horrible number.
Is that true?
I will send you the study. I was looking at it just before we started recording, but they have to ask other people for an explanation. And sometimes it's family members, sometimes it's friends. Like, have you come across this? What do you think this means? Instead of just going, lawyer, I don't understand. Please do better.
To me, that's almost like malpractice, right? You can't overstate how important it is for a lawyer to give advice, no matter what you're doing, to give it in a way that other people understand. To my mind, they haven't done their jobs yet. I think that's what you were saying, Scott. You literally you're in breach of contract.
I just simply can't understand how the view from certain lawyers is that legal language has this established meaning and therefore it's more precise. And yet it doesn't work for clients. And so you might feel like you've done your job in sticking to 100 years of used precise so-called language, but it doesn't help the client. But lawyers will argue that, won't they? Legal language is an established meaning, it's more precise. What do you say to that kind of lawyer, Colleen?
I'll dig a bit deeper and ask, is there another way to get this across accurately? And if there really, really isn't, then it's about, well, how do we define this so that someone else can understand it? The minute you start digging, the minute you hear someone say something like, oh, they have to put it that way because the legislation says so, it's always worth asking, where in the legislation does it prescribe wording? Like in New Zealand, I think there's one tiny piece of legislation about insurance policies. They all must have this important note at the beginning. There's so few things like that, though, where it actually prescribes certain words. And if you think my goal here is to capture the meaning and give this meaning to my client, then the words, it gives you so much more freedom to think about how we can get this across effectively.
Yeah, or show me the case. Show me the case that says this word has got a specialized meaning. That's not even how the rules of interpretation works. So I agree. That's really one of the problems, is this perception that legal language is more precise than it actually is, right? What do you think, Liezl?
I think this is like the one time where it's such a big advantage being the non-lawyer, because you can hide kind of behind that and go, I don't know what this means. Can you please, silly muggle, please keep explaining this. We understand. And I find sometimes it's the less experienced lawyers who will cling to that wording and be afraid to let go. What is the word? Which is the one I had last week? Sole, your sole responsibility, or you are solely responsible for this. Like, can we say it's your only responsibility, or you are only responsible for this, or this is your only remedy? No. Soul has a very specific meaning. And so when you start having the conversation and start kind of reassuring them that words have had meaning for a very long time and people understand dictionaries, then they calm down.
But do you think younger lawyers hold on to it because because they don't know better, or is it because that's the precedent that they've got and they don't have the power, or they don't feel as though they have the power to change even a word like solely, because that's the word that's in the precedent, so it must be what the firm wants them to use?
All of the above. So they feel they're inexperienced. And with this particular lawyer, I'm sorry I said particular, that's Elizabeth's favorite word. With this lawyer, his challenge was, there must be a reason why this is the word. I read it everywhere. It must be the best word. I'm not sure. And I I tried the show me the precedent or show me where it says I have to use this word. He was like, no, I can't, or I don't know, but I'm sure it has to be the right one. And so they don't kind of feel like they just don't have the courage to step away from it and to stand by that decision and go, do you know what? I'm the GC. I'm going to say the company can speak this way. Let them challenge me. They don't have that confidence.
Isn't that the problem then for plain language? But I don't even say it's a plain language problem. It's a problem for everything that comes into the legal profession, which is no one wants to be the first to do anything in the legal profession. It's not just plain language, but in this particular case, you're that GC or you are that lawyer who says, do you know what? I'm going to change the word solely to only, and then sits there and thinks, if in 20 years' time that clause gets picked apart in court, I'm going to believe that it was because the word solely was changed to only. I won't be able to get past this idea that it probably wasn't that word that did it. Isn't that the challenge?
We always say legalese is hereditary, and you've just reminded me of a story. The first time I was in a firm was my first day of work. And I got asked to write a letter. This was a long time ago, where you still attach letters to emails. I got asked to write a letter that says, we received the documentation that you sent us. We are going to need some time to go through it, but we'll get back to you soon. Right? And that's what I wrote. And we went through 12 drafts and ended up with, I refer to your communication dated 25 January 2005. We have received the documentation, and then it said, we will take instructions from our clients and revert. I'm like, revert to what?
Did you bill the client for all those different?
Yeah, 12 drafts on something that A could have been an email, and B could have just said what I said first. If my memory serves me, that was to a client. It's just, you could pick that apart and find probably like 20 reasons why that is like not friendly, overly difficult.
It's not just lawyers who get very attached to wording things a certain way. It's in many industries, we have these darlings, these favorites. I'm thinking of insurance, where it's very important to say the break-in has to be accompanied by forcible and violent entry or exit. And we spent so much time with an insurer going through, what does this actually mean? You have to apply force to something. And we settled on, visible signs of a break-in. There have to be visible signs of a break-in. And it feels to me like it doesn't sound very different, but when you read it, it is friendlier. But they had such a hard time letting go of the words. We also say, please find attached here too, or I trust this email finds you well, because we're comfortable that, now I've started my email in a friendly way. But we all have these darlings, and letting go of them can be very hard. It doesn't just have to be, last will and testament or null, void, and of no force or effect whatsoever. We each have our darlings. And so we also have to have empathy with the lawyers.
Can I ask a question? When I do training in law firms, it's often with grads, and they will say, all of this stuff you're teaching me is well and good, but my partner won't let me do it.
Yeah.
It seems like a very hierarchical kind of world. Does that mean that a partner could be the one who actually helps make their juniors more effective communicators?
It's absolutely true what they told you. That hierarchy is immovable in some ways. So it's twofold. Essentially, when you are a young lawyer or a trainee, what you're doing is you're imitating other people. It's not natural. The second part is not natural to write like that. When I am tired, I still go back to legalese. That's still my natural way of writing.
Your default.
My default. That's how strong that is. Literally, law firms are hard places. Scott, you can nod your head here. It's literally like drummed into you. I don't know if that's the right expression. I am too an English second language speaker. It's like it's very violent how they teach you that. They really throw the book at you. So it is ingrained.
Yes. And you are made to feel like it is just the only way. And it is worth arguing over those tiny little changes in the language. Because if you don't and it happens, it's going to be on us. Because Elizabeth and I have talked about it before. And Elizabeth, you say, don't you? By the time it gets to court, it's all too late anyway.
Yeah. You don't want
But
to write something that was previously so unclear that the parties had to go to court.
this is it, isn't it? It's that very often, if things are written in plain language, whatever the problems were aren't likely to come down to wording in the contract. It's going to be something else. But if you then have to go to court to litigate over exact precise wording because the two of you couldn't work it out yourself because you had no idea where you stood in those situations, because you look at the contract and you go, actually, I've now realized I don't quite understand what this means. And then you go back to your lawyer who drafted it and they say to you, oh, well, we're going to have to get a litigation lawyer involved. The client must sit there and think, but hold on a second, you drafted this. You know what it means so that I don't have to get the litigator involved. And
That was the whole point.
The number of times that we have asked a lawyer about their own contract that they drafted, what does this mean? I'm not sure I got it from someone else's contract. It's shocking.
yes.
They can't
Yes.
explain it to you. So how do we expect the client to understand?
So do you think, and Colleen, your answer can be more general, and Liezl, I think you do have some insight into the legal industry, but do you think that that is changing? Do you think that there's increasing emphasis on writing better? Or like, have you seen an uptick in lawyers thinking about this? Maybe spending some money to train people?
I have had 2 separate conversations with 2 separate lawyers recently, and both of them said to me, I didn't know plain language was a thing, but I've been trying to do it for so long. And I only now realized that it was a movement or it was an actual thing. And you kind of go, oh, is that on us? Like, are we not singing loudly enough? But I feel like there's an increase in empathy. Never mind that in South Africa, at least, we have really great legislation around plain language. And plain language often comes up in our legislation and in guidelines and in things like that. And obviously the ISO standard for plain language and now for plain legal language. So internationally, there's an awareness and a movement towards plain language. And whether it's the carrot or the stick, I think there's definitely more attention on clear communication. But it does give me hope when lawyers go, I've been trying to do this and now I've discovered that there's a whole plain language community or a legal design community, and that's amazing. So I think that's a step in the right direction.
In the private sector in New Zealand, law firms that decide it's going to be their point of difference invest heavily in training their staff in plain language and can come a very, very long way. It's really impressive when they commit. And of course, you're going to get variation within. It doesn't mean everything coming out of the firm is suddenly perfect, but the sense of there is a real economic value to us doing this, a real commercial value, seems to be a big thing for the private firms.
Right. I think everybody in the legal industry is focused, it's almost myopic, focus on the impact of AI, specifically on drafting, so writing contracts. How do you hope the plain language movement will sort of integrate itself with this change and this speeding up of, how people conclude contracts?
I think it has great potential to. It depends how the AI is used, whether the people who are creating that software that allows for drafting and tweaking to be done well, whether they are focusing on correcting for plain English in the prompts that they create.
Absolutely. And not just, there's that principle of rubbish in, rubbish out.
I think that's very important. So part of the plain language writing process is deciding what you need to say, understanding what your audience needs from the communication, what they want to hear. And then obviously there are things that you must say, but getting that right. So what do I want to say? What is important here? And getting your communication down to only that thing. And then if you know what you have to say and you know what you need to say, by all means, use AI to say it clearly. We truly believe, I think Elizabeth shares my belief, that people have a right to understand the documents they need to actively participate in their own lives. And if AI can help us achieve that, that's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's such a valuable point. There is this human aspect to it. And I am in this moment hyper aware that I'm speaking to 2 countries we're desperately trying to decolonize. Sorry, Scott. We have the Maori and we have in South Africa a vast amount of people who have to live under this legal system that isn't their own, that they can't understand. And so we're pushing them down essentially. So it's a very important reason, I think, to start really thinking about effective communications, that access to justice angle.
With all of this that we've discussed, where do lawyers even start changing their writing habits?
Colleen, you can go.
I was going to say, who wants to
I can
take?
see
Who
you on the
wants
edge
to-
of your seat there.
Yeah, who wants to start with that?
I would say just start with the little things. Nobody needs a prior to, throw in a before. You know, swap out the things that feel safe and easy from a language point of view.
That your reader understands who is doing what to whom. Use the active voice. Just, make it clear whose responsibility this is.
So at the end of each episode, we ask all of our guests 4 questions designed to get your thoughts on the legal profession as it is today and how it could be, and to give our listeners some ideas of how they could possibly, through designing their legal careers, change that, no matter where they are now. Okay, so the first question is, what advice would you give a lawyer just starting out in the profession? Liezl, I'm going to call on you.
Read Joseph Kimball.
Yeah.
I love Joseph Kimball. He has published so much evidence on the benefits of plain language, the great myth that plain language is not precise, writing for dollars, writing to please. Those are excellent resources. Follow people on LinkedIn who write clearly and who talk about clear writing and offer tips. Start somewhere. Just do one thing. Change your passives to actives. And if you have to look that up, then that's a great start too.
Colleen, what's one thing about the legal profession or legal writing that you wish that you could change? And how do you think that change could come about?
Okay, I would change intimidating, impenetrable writing, and I'd change that with plain language training and making a commitment to understanding how readers behave. And if I could give you a mantra, it would be, if they don't understand it, you haven't communicated it successfully. That puts the responsibility where I think it belongs.
Liezl, what is a common myth about successful communication in the legal profession that you feel needs to be debunked?
Who was it that said the most common myth about communication is that it has actually taken place? I guess that plain language is less precise than legal language. We always uncover things when we write in plain language that the author goes, I would never say that. Well, that's not what I mean at all. And then we can improve things from there. The other one is that maybe this is an unexpected one, that plain language will solve all of the communication problems. Sometimes communication is complex because your system or your product is complex, and we can't solve that with plain language. Then maybe it's time to take a step back and go, we need to rethink the system that we're using, the process that we're following, or the way that we've structured our product. And that's a little harder. But once you've done that, we can absolutely explain it in clear language.
Okay, so this one's to Colleen. What would it look like if in law we incorporated these principles that we talked about today in their either career path or in their training?
I reckon it's about inundating people with good examples. I think lawyers get just so surrounded by not great writing that they think that's normal. And yet there are so many phenomenally written legal documents. Just really get people reading them, picking them apart, working out what works about them, stealing all the best bits. I think it would make an absolutely massive difference.
Isn't it frustrating how most of these things are confidential and we can't publish them and show them and go, this is such a great example of legal writing? No, we've got to keep it a secret.
But there are examples out there. And I think I'm going to jump in here. When you are on your career path, make sure that you have that mindset of curiosity and lifelong learning. You don't just have to look at legal documents. There are examples of good writing all over the show. Us lawyers like to plonk legal in front of things like legal tech and legal design and legal writing, but we're not altogether different from the muggles.
So, Colleen, Liezl, tell people how they can find you if they want to reach out for more information.
You can Google me. Our website is ColleenTrolove.com, and I'm in LinkedIn as well, Colleen Trolove.
Same, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there, or you can go to heyplainjane.com.
Right. This has been absolutely phenomenal. A big thank you to Colleen and Liezl for coming on the show and for talking to us about the verbosity that besieges us. Couldn't resist that. The start of a 1970s plain language book that was written by a lawyer. We are going to make some resources available for you.
We'll have it on the show notes and we'll put links out onto all the platforms. And obviously you and I will do our jobs and promote this on different platforms so people will be able to get hold of it everywhere.
Yes. So we're going to put some word lists there for you, how to substitute some well-known complicated words with a simpler equivalent or more direct equivalent. And we will also include an e-learning module that teaches you a bit of grammar. So those things that you don't remember anymore, active and passive voice, for instance, that module takes care of it. We've been your hosts, Scott Simmons and Elizabeth de Stadler, and this has been Legal Off the Leash.